What would you do if the most important day of your life came and went, and no one showed up? I stood at the edge of the school courtyard, gazing across the sea of students and their families. The laughter, the smiles, the proud parents snapping photos, everything seemed perfect. But there I was, alone. No family, no friends, no one. It was supposed to be a day I'd remember forever. My high school graduation. A milestone that should have been shared with the people who loved and cared about me. Instead, I stood there, in the midst of a celebration I wasn't a part of. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the tassel on my cap, the weight of the gown pressing down on me like a reminder of my solitude. I had spent 4 years working hard to get to this point. I had sacrificed friendships, endured sleepless nights, and fought through moments of doubt. And now, as I was about to walk across the stage, there wasn't a single person in the crowd cheering for me. I kept telling myself it didn't matter. Graduation was just the beginning of the rest of my life. It wasn't about who was there. It was about what I had accomplished. I had worked hard. But that didn't stop the gnawing ache in my chest. The empty space where I had imagined a cheering family, proud friends, and maybe even a surprise congratulation from someone who believed in me. But as I looked around, it became painfully clear that my world had always been quieter than the others. My father had called earlier to wish me luck, but he was stuck at work. My mom had passed away when I was younger, and my extended family, well, they never really bothered to check in. I had a few friends here and there, but not close ones. My relationships were always a little distant. I was just too used to being alone. A voice in the crowd caught my attention. "Congratulations, Lena. You did it." I turned, hoping to find someone, anyone, who had noticed me. But it was just a stranger. One of my classmates, shouting over to their group of friends. I smiled weakly and waved, then turned back to the empty seats where my family should have been. It felt surreal. My feet seemed to be moving on their own as I walked into the auditorium, where the ceremony was about to begin. I found my seat in the second row, near the end, and sat down. My name was on the program, the same as everyone else's. I was going to walk across that stage and get my diploma. But somehow it didn't feel like a victory. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. I thought about how my story might sound to someone watching this video from the outside. Maybe someone else had felt this way, too. Maybe someone else had a graduation where no one showed up. Maybe they had a graduation where their family couldn't make it, where they felt forgotten, unnoticed. Was it possible that someone out there could relate to me? This story might just spark a new beginning. Maybe the worst part of this day wasn't about being forgotten, but about finally realizing that I had been living my life like this for far too long. A life without real connection. And so, as I sat there, surrounded by laughter and joy that seemed so far out of reach, I wondered, what if this day was the turning point? What if, even without anyone by my side today, I could finally learn what it meant to stand up for myself, to keep going, and to find my way in this world? The room started to fill up with energy, the crowd growing louder. The ceremony was about to begin. My name was about to be called. I had worked so hard for this moment, and no one was here to see it. But I was here. I was standing at the edge of my future. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for people to show up for me. Maybe it was time to show up for myself. I took a deep breath and straightened my gown. The lights dimmed, and the first name was called. I still wasn't sure what the rest of my life would look like, but I knew one thing for sure. The story of this day, the loneliness, the pain, the sense of being invisible, wasn't going to define me. It was just the beginning. And maybe, just maybe, someone would show up for me soon. I've never been the kind of person who had a crowd behind her. You know, the ones who always seem to be surrounded by friends and family, the ones who laugh a little louder, smile a little brighter. That was never me. I've always been on the outside looking in, watching other people live the kind of life I imagined for myself, where people show up when it counts. It wasn't like I wasn't trying. I wanted to be that girl, full of life, surrounded by people who cared. But life had a funny way of teaching me that things don't always go the way you hope. When I was little, it was different. My mom was always there for me. She would pick me up from school, take me to the park, and always make sure I felt loved. I never had to worry about being alone. But when I was 7, everything changed. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she was gone less than a year later. That's when I started to understand what it felt like to lose the one person who made you feel like you mattered. It wasn't just the fact that she was gone, it was the way everyone around me stopped talking about her, like her death was something to be forgotten. I remember going to school the next day after she passed, trying to act normal. But no one knew what to say. They avoided me, like they didn't want to bring up the one thing that was consuming my thoughts. So I started to do what I do best. I withdrew. I became the girl who blended in, the one who didn't make waves, the one who didn't ask for help. Because when I asked for help, people left. And I wasn't about to let that happen again. My dad did his best to take care of me after my mom passed. But he was always working. He worked long hours at the car dealership, barely home before I was asleep, and gone before I woke up. He wasn't the type to sit down and talk about his feelings, and he certainly wasn't great at handling his own grief. I learned early on to be self-sufficient, to take care of myself and not expect anyone else to do it for me. And then there were the friends, or at least the ones I tried to make. In middle school, I thought I had found my place with a group of girls who were kind and funny. But as we got older, I started to notice that I wasn't the one they reached out to when they needed someone. They had their best friends, their close-knit groups, and I was just there. I was always the one who showed up when someone else needed me, but when it came to me, the phone calls were never made. By the time I entered high school, I had stopped trying. I focused on my grades, my work, my goals. I figured if I couldn't have people, I could at least have achievements. But it was lonely. I always ate lunch alone, sat in the back of the classroom, kept my head down and my mouth shut. And somehow it felt easier that way. The fewer people noticed me, the fewer chances there were for disappointment. Still, I dreamed. I dreamed of graduating with friends and family surrounding me, of being part of something. I wanted to have that moment where I could say, "Look at me. I did it. I made it through all of this, and I'm standing here, proud and unbroken." But the closer I got to that moment, the more I realized that nobody cared. Nobody had shown up for me. They had all been too busy, too distracted by their own lives. And deep down, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe it wasn't just about being forgotten, but about never having really mattered to anyone in the first place. As I stood there in the auditorium, waiting for my name to be called, I reflected on everything that had led me here. All those late nights, the tears I had swallowed in silence, the times I had pushed through the loneliness and the pain, thinking that eventually it would get better. But standing there, on the verge of the most important moment of my life, I realized that it was all just a story I had been telling myself. The idea that everything would fall into place eventually had turned out to be a myth. People don't always show up when you need them most. Sometimes you have to learn how to be there for yourself. I had convinced myself that graduation would be the day I would be seen, the day I would finally feel like I mattered. But now it felt more like a reminder of how invisible I had become. Even in a room full of people, I was still alone. I could hear the chatter of excitement around me as the ceremony began. The sounds of applause filled the air as each name was called. I watched my classmates walk across the stage, their faces lit up with joy as they accepted their diplomas. I felt a pang of jealousy. How had they all managed to find a group of people who cared enough to show up for them? Was it because they were just lucky? Or was it that they, too, had worked hard but had learned to ask for help, to trust others, to let people into their lives? I didn't have those answers. But I did know that I had to keep moving forward. I had made it this far alone, and now I had to figure out what came next. I didn't want to live the rest of my life waiting for someone to show up for me. I had to find a way to stand on my own. It was time to stop wishing for people to notice me and start noticing myself. As the ceremony continued, I made a vow to myself. I would no longer let the absence of others define my worth. It was time to redefine what success meant to me. No more waiting for someone else to validate my existence. I was enough. I had always been enough. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to start believing it. The graduation ceremony ended, but it didn't feel like a victory. It was a moment I had built up in my mind for so long, and yet, when it arrived, it was empty. I walked out of the auditorium with my diploma in hand, feeling more hollow than I had when I first entered. The weight of the paper felt heavier than it should have, like a symbol of everything I hadn't achieved. I had imagined this day differently. I thought that once I graduated, something would change. I thought I would feel proud, accomplished, maybe even a little bit celebrated. But instead, I felt lost, alone, invisible. I had spent 4 years working to get to this point, but now, standing on the edge of adulthood, I realized something crucial. I wasn't sure who I was without the walls of high school surrounding me. Walking home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of something big, something that could either lift me up or push me further into the shadows. Graduation wasn't the end of my journey, it was just the beginning. And that thought terrified me. I had spent so much of my life trying to avoid the pain of being alone. The years of silence, the empty seats at family events, the awkwardness of not being able to connect with others, it had all made me stronger, but it had also made me scared. Scared to reach out, scared to trust. Because every time I let someone in, they either let me down or disappeared. So I learned to depend on myself, to keep my distance, to never expect too much. But now, as the future loomed ahead, I realized that was no longer enough. I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep hiding in the corner of my own life. If I wanted things to change, I was going to have to step out of the shadows and find a way to make my own path. The next few days after graduation were a blur of mixed emotions. Everyone I knew had already started making plans for the future, college, travel, jobs. Some of my classmates were already making moves to leave town, to begin the next chapter of their lives. Meanwhile, I was stuck. I had no clear direction. I spent my days applying for jobs, hoping that something would stick. My dad kept telling me that I needed to be patient, that things would work out in time, but I wasn't so sure. I had spent so long keeping my head down, doing what was expected of me, that I had never really thought about what I wanted. One afternoon, as I was scrolling through job listings, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in a while, Sarah, one of the girls I'd known back in middle school. We weren't close, but she had always been kind to me, even if we had drifted apart over the years. The message was simple. Hey, Lena. It's been a while. How are you? I saw your graduation picture, and I just wanted to say congrats. If you're not doing anything, I'm hosting a small get-together this weekend. It'd be great to catch up. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. I wasn't sure if I was ready to put myself out there again. The fear of being rejected, of being left out again, held me back. But something inside me nudged me forward. Maybe this was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to rebuild some connection, to show myself that I was capable of more than just surviving alone. I decided to go. The weekend arrived, and I found myself standing outside a house I didn't recognize, heart racing in my chest. Sarah's get-together was a small affair, just a few people sitting around the living room chatting, drinking, and laughing. I felt out of place immediately. The group was close-knit, and I wasn't sure how to break through the invisible wall that kept me on the outside. But then Sarah spotted me and waved me over. Lena. Hey, I'm so glad you came. I forced a smile and walked toward her, trying to calm the nerves in my stomach. Sarah introduced me to a few people, and for a brief moment, I felt like I was just another face in the crowd. They were all friendly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. My mind kept wandering back to the empty graduation seats, to the way I had felt invisible. And then something unexpected happened. As the evening wore on, I began to let my guard down. The conversation shifted from small talk to more personal stories, and I found myself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in a long while. Sarah introduced me to Mia, a girl who had just finished college and was looking for a place to stay while she figured out her next move. We hit it off immediately, sharing stories about high school and the strange feeling of being caught between childhood and adulthood. She made me realize something I hadn't thought about in a long time. I didn't have to be perfect to be accepted. I didn't have to have it all figured out. Mia's energy was infectious, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I was seen. Like I mattered. Not because I had accomplished everything I thought I should, but simply because I was there, sharing the same space as everyone else. As the night came to a close, Sarah and Mia both invited me to hang out again sometime. I hesitated, but then I realized this was my chance. The world I had kept myself locked out of was opening up, and for the first time, I didn't have to face it alone. The next day, I felt a shift. A small one, but enough to make me realize something important. Maybe I wasn't as invisible as I thought. Maybe, just maybe, people could see me if I let them. But it wasn't going to be easy. I had spent so many years closing myself off from others, pushing people away, convinced that being alone was safer. Now, I had to face the fact that I needed to change, to be open to the idea that not everyone was going to leave me. That was a hard pill to swallow, but it was also the first step toward building something different. Toward building a life where I didn't wait for others to show up, but where I showed up for myself and for the people who wanted to be there. It's funny how life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. A few weeks after Sarah's get-together, I found myself slowly slipping into a routine I hadn't imagined for myself. I was still looking for jobs, but now I was also making a conscious effort to get out of my shell. Mia and I started hanging out more often, coffee dates, casual walks in the park, and even late-night talks about everything from dreams to regrets. It felt like the first real connection I'd made in years. I started to realize that the loneliness I had grown so accustomed to wasn't something I had to accept forever. I could change it if I allowed myself to. It wasn't about finding people to fill the empty spaces in my life. It was about learning to build connections, to nurture relationships, and to trust others again. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I was pretending, like the old habits of shutting myself off were still there, lurking just beneath the surface. But I fought against it, reminding myself that this was the only way forward. Slowly, I began to feel more comfortable in my own skin, more at ease with being around people, even if it felt unnatural at times. One afternoon, as I was grabbing lunch at a small cafe, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello. Hey, Lena. It's Mr. Thompson, your high school principal," came the voice on the other end. "I hope you're doing well. I know this is a bit out of the blue, but I wanted to check in with you." I blinked in surprise. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Thompson since graduation, and we had never been close. In fact, I couldn't recall him ever reaching out to a student personally. He was always kind, but he wasn't the type to show up at every game or event like some of the other teachers did. So why was he calling me? Hi, Mr. Thompson," I said, trying to hide my surprise. "I'm doing okay. What's up? I saw that you were having a pretty quiet graduation. I couldn't help but notice that you didn't have any family or friends there to celebrate with you. And I know that's a tough thing to experience, especially on a day that's supposed to be full of joy. I just wanted to reach out and let you know that I see you, Lena. I see the hard work you put into your studies, and I'm proud of everything you've accomplished." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to cry, to finally let out all the emotions I had been bottling up for years. But instead, I just sat there, listening to him talk. "Listen, I know this probably isn't something you were expecting, but I wanted to offer my support. If you ever need anything, advice, a reference, or just someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out. You've got a lot of potential, Lena. And even if it felt like you didn't have anyone there for you, I'm here. I'll always be here." I had no words at first. I felt like I was hearing him speak through a fog, not fully processing what he was saying. The truth was, I had never really thought about Mr. Thompson in that way. To me, he had always been the distant authority figure, the person who gave speeches at assemblies and handed out diplomas. But now, hearing him offer me his support, it felt different. Real. Thank you, I finally managed to say, my voice a little shaky. I really appreciate that. We talked for a few more minutes, and by the end of the conversation, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I had believed. Maybe the world wasn't as cold and indifferent as I had thought it was. Maybe there were people out there who did care, even if they hadn't shown up when I expected them to. I ended the call, my heart a little lighter than before. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. And as I looked out the window of the cafe, watching the people passing by, I realized that support didn't always come from where you expected. Sometimes it came from the places you least imagined. The next few days were a blur of self-reflection and quiet change. I started to look at my future with a different perspective. I had spent so much of my life waiting for people to show up for me, but maybe I didn't need to wait anymore. Maybe I could be the one to show up for myself. I continued applying for jobs, but now I was also thinking about what I truly wanted to do with my life. I wanted to make a difference, to find something meaningful. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about living. I had spent so much time hiding behind my own walls that I had forgotten what it felt like to step out into the world and chase something real. Mia continued to be my anchor, but it was more than just her friendship that helped me through. It was the realization that maybe the universe had been nudging me towards something all along. Maybe this was the time for me to start building the life I had always dreamed of, not by waiting for things to fall into place, but by creating the space for them to happen. And then, something even more unexpected occurred. One evening, as I was walking home from a job interview, I ran into Sarah again. This time, we didn't just chat briefly. She invited me to grab coffee at a local cafe, and we spent hours talking about everything: our futures, our regrets, our fears. Sarah was no longer the stranger from my past. She had become a friend, someone I could relate to, someone who had been in my shoes and understood the loneliness of trying to figure things out on your own. As we sat there, laughing about silly memories from school, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I realized that I wasn't alone anymore, not in the way I had thought. I had people now, people who cared, people who were showing up when I needed them most. But more importantly, I realized that I was starting to show up for myself. The weeks after Mr. Thompson's call and my growing connection with Mia and Sarah marked a significant shift in my life. For the first time, I wasn't just drifting along, waiting for something to happen. I was actively seeking change, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was moving in the right direction. The job search was still slow. I had a few interviews, but nothing seemed to stick. The rejection stung, especially after all the time I had spent trying to prepare and put myself out there. However, unlike before, I didn't let the setbacks bury me. Instead, I took each rejection as a lesson and an opportunity to refine my approach. I began seeking feedback from those who interviewed me, pushing myself to grow from each experience rather than wallowing in frustration. Meanwhile, I spent more time with Mia, who had become something of a mentor without even trying. She was a year older than me, and her confidence in the face of uncertainty was something I admired. Mia had already been through the college grind, and now she was in that awkward in-between space, figuring out her next move. I often found myself turning to her for advice, especially on how to handle the unknown. She had a way of looking at life that helped me shift my perspective. You know, Lena, Mia said one afternoon as we walked through the park, life doesn't just hand you opportunities. You have to create them for yourself. And if something feels like it's not working out, sometimes it's because it wasn't meant to be. But don't let that stop you. Just keep pushing, keep learning, and something will click. Her words echoed in my mind long after our conversation ended. Keep pushing. Keep learning. Something will click. It sounded simple, but it was the clarity I needed. I had spent so much time trying to avoid failure that I had forgotten to embrace the lessons within it. That afternoon, I sat down at my computer, opened up my resume, and began tweaking it, not to match some perfect standard, but to reflect who I truly was. I had been trying to mold myself into something I thought employers wanted to see, but now I realized that wasn't the answer. The answer was to be authentic, to present myself honestly, and to trust that the right opportunity would come. One day, a few weeks later, as I was waiting for an interview to begin at a local nonprofit, I ran into an unexpected face, Mr. Thompson. He was standing in the lobby, talking to a few people from the organization, and as soon as he saw me, his face lit up with recognition. "Lena, what a pleasant surprise," he said, walking over with a warm smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." I smiled back, feeling a little bit awkward, but mostly glad to see him. "Hey, Mr. Thompson." "Yeah, I'm here for an interview." "That's great." He paused, looking thoughtful. "I'm actually involved with this nonprofit in a way that's not widely known. I've been mentoring some of the younger people they work with, helping them find jobs and navigate life after graduation." I blinked. "Wait, really?" He nodded. "Yes, I know the struggles you've been facing, Lena. It's not always easy to figure things out, and sometimes it feels like the world is just waiting for you to mess up. But you've got more potential than you realize. I think you'd be a great fit for their team." I was stunned. Here was Mr. Thompson, the same man who had reached out to me months ago, offering his support without asking for anything in return. And now it seemed he was offering me yet another lifeline, this time, a chance to be part of something meaningful. "You really think so?" I asked, feeling a sense of hope rise within me. For the first time in a while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe something was actually working out. "Absolutely," Mr. Thompson said, his voice steady and reassuring. "You've got the skills, the heart, and the drive. Sometimes, it just takes a little push in the right direction." The interview went well, and a few days later, I received an email offering me a position with the nonprofit. I was overwhelmed with emotion as I read the message. It wasn't just a job offer, it felt like a second chance. It felt like validation. For the first time in years, I felt like I was heading in the right direction, with a purpose that was bigger than just me. The work wasn't glamorous. I would be helping the team organize outreach programs for local youth, coordinating events, and helping people find resources to improve their lives. It wasn't a dream job, but it was a start. And for someone who had been lost and unsure for so long, it was exactly what I needed. When I told Mia about the offer, she was overjoyed for me. "I knew you could do it," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "This is the beginning of something big for you, Lena. I'm so proud of you." I smiled, grateful for her support. But deep down, I knew that I wasn't just proud of the job offer. I was proud of myself for showing up, for pushing through the self-doubt and fear, for being willing to step out of my comfort zone, and for trusting that things could get better. The first few weeks at the nonprofit were challenging, but in the best way possible. I was learning new skills every day, gaining confidence in my abilities, and, most importantly, feeling like I was making a difference. It wasn't about earning a paycheck or building a career for the sake of status. It was about connecting with people, helping them, and doing something that mattered. And as I spent more time with the people in the nonprofit, especially the youth we were helping, I realized something profound. My life had meaning. I had a purpose. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was contributing to something larger than myself, something that could change lives. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The nonprofit was more than just a job, it was a lifeline, a beacon of hope. As the weeks passed, I began to immerse myself fully in the work, finding joy in the small victories and feeling a sense of fulfillment that I had long forgotten was possible. Every day brought a new challenge, whether it was organizing a community event or helping a young person apply for scholarships, and each challenge was a reminder that I had a role to play in the world. But despite the new sense of purpose, I still carried my old fears and insecurities. I wasn't completely free of the self-doubt that had followed me for so long. There were moments when I felt like I didn't quite belong, especially when I was surrounded by people who seemed so much more accomplished than I was. My coworkers had years of experience under their belts, and I often wondered if they saw me as the inexperienced, overzealous newcomer who had stumbled into a lucky break. One afternoon, I was sitting in the break room, trying to gather my thoughts for an upcoming project, when Sarah texted me, "Hey, you free this weekend? Let's catch up." I smiled at the text, grateful for her friendship. It had been a few weeks since we last saw each other, and I was eager to reconnect. Sarah was one of the few people who didn't look at me with judgment or pity. She simply saw me, flaws and all, and accepted me for who I was. That meant everything to me. We met at a coffee shop the following Saturday, and as soon as I walked in, I spotted her sitting by the window. She waved me over, her face lighting up with a smile that could melt away any lingering doubts I had. "How's everything going?" she asked as I sat down. "Are you settling in okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, actually, I am. It's been a lot to take in, but I'm starting to feel like I'm making a difference. I've been organizing these events, helping the kids with their resumes and applications. It's been so rewarding, Sarah." She raised an eyebrow. "But?" I hesitated, taking a sip of my coffee before replying. "I don't know. Some days, I just feel like I'm not cut out for this. Like I'm just playing pretend, and eventually, people are going to realize I have no idea what I'm doing." She didn't immediately respond. Instead, she studied me for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she leaned forward and said, "Lena, I think you're way too hard on yourself. You've been through so much and you're still standing. You're here, doing the work, and you're good at it. It's okay to not have everything figured out yet. In fact, most people don't. You just have to keep showing up like you have been." I felt a wave of emotion rise in me. The old Lena, the one who believed she wasn't good enough, would have dismissed Sarah's words as comforting platitudes. But now, with everything that had happened, I realized that she wasn't just giving me empty advice, she was speaking the truth. "You really think so?" I asked, my voice almost trembling. "Of course I do," she said with a soft smile. "You're one of the most capable people I know. The fact that you've gotten this far, despite everything you've been through, speaks volumes about your strength." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel proud of the progress I had made. As time passed, I started to find my rhythm at the nonprofit. I wasn't the new girl anymore. I was a valued member of the team. I worked with incredible people who believed in what we were doing, and slowly, I began to trust myself more. I stopped questioning whether I was good enough and started focusing on how I could do better. There were still days when the self-doubt crept in, when I felt like I wasn't living up to my potential or that I wasn't helping enough people. But those moments became fewer and farther between as I grew into my role. And every time I felt that sense of insecurity, I reminded myself of the words Sarah had shared with me, that showing up, even when things weren't perfect, was enough. One of the most rewarding parts of my new life at the nonprofit was working directly with the young people we served. They were bright, full of potential, and full of questions about the future, questions I could relate to all too well. It was in those moments of shared vulnerability, of guiding them through their own uncertainties, that I realized I wasn't just helping them, they were helping me too. One afternoon, I sat down with a young woman named Jada, who had recently graduated high school but was unsure about what came next. She had dreams of going to college, but the financial burden seemed insurmountable. "I don't know what to do," Jada said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I want to go to school, but it feels like no matter how hard I try, there's always something blocking me. I'm not sure I can do it." I looked at her, recognizing the same uncertainty that had once consumed me. "I get it," I said softly. "But you can do it. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is. Let's figure this out together. one step at a time. We'll find the resources, the scholarships, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way. Jada nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. In that moment, I realized something profound. I wasn't just teaching these kids how to fill out forms or navigate the world beyond high school. I was showing them that someone cared, that they weren't invisible, that their dreams mattered. And as I saw Jada's expression change from uncertainty to hope, I knew I had found my purpose. As weeks turned into months, the path I was on began to feel like it was carved just for me. The work I was doing at the nonprofit continued to fulfill me in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Every day, I learned something new, whether it was how to handle a difficult situation with a colleague or how to guide a young person through their own struggles. My confidence was growing, and so was my understanding of what it truly meant to have purpose. But even though I had found something I was passionate about, I still felt that nagging doubt that had haunted me for so long. What if this was just a stepping stone? What if I was meant for something bigger? It was a question that lingered at the back of my mind, especially as I saw more of my peers moving forward in their careers or heading to graduate school. I had chosen a different path, yes, but was it the right one? One Tuesday afternoon, as I was wrapping up a meeting with a group of local business owners who wanted to partner with the nonprofit, I received an unexpected call. It was from Mr. Thompson. "Lena," he said, his voice warm but with an undercurrent of urgency. "I've been thinking about you lately, and I think I've found an opportunity that could be a game changer for you." My heart skipped a beat. Mr. Thompson had been my mentor since that fateful day when I thought my graduation was a bust. If he was calling me about something, it was important. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. "I've been working with an old colleague of mine who runs a nonprofit accelerator program. They help young people who are passionate about social impact to launch their own projects. They're looking for someone with a lot of potential, someone who has experience working with marginalized communities and a heart for service. And I think you're exactly who they need." I froze. The words hung in the air like a challenge, a temptation. "That sounds amazing," I said slowly, my mind racing. "But why me? I'm still figuring things out myself. I don't even know if I'm ready for something like this." Mr. Thompson chuckled softly. "Lena, you've been ready all along. Sometimes you have to step into the unknown to realize how much you're capable of. You've got the heart, the skills, and the drive. Trust me on this." I couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion as I listened to his words. It wasn't just the offer that was stirring something deep within me, it was the belief he had in me, the confidence he placed in me. It was like he was handing me the keys to something greater, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid to take them. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just come meet with them. There's no pressure, no expectation. But I really think you should see where this could take you. You've got a lot to offer, Lena. Don't sell yourself short." The next few days were a blur. I spent hours researching the accelerator program, trying to wrap my head around what it entailed. It seemed like an incredible opportunity, one that could give me the chance to launch my own project and truly make a difference on a larger scale. But even as I felt the excitement grow, doubt still crept in. Was I really ready to step into the world of entrepreneurship? Was I ready to take a leadership role when I still felt like I was figuring out who I was? The day of the meeting arrived, and I found myself standing in front of a sleek, modern building downtown. The program's offices were located in a co-working space filled with young, ambitious people, and as I walked through the door, I was struck by the energy in the room. People were brainstorming, typing away at their laptops, and chatting excitedly about their projects. It felt like a world I had only glimpsed from afar. I was led to a conference room where I was introduced to a woman named Riley, one of the program's directors. She had a calm, confident demeanor and a welcoming smile. Her presence instantly put me at ease. "Lena, thank you so much for coming in today," Riley said as we shook hands. "We've been following your work at the nonprofit, and we're really impressed with what you've done so far. We think you could be a great fit for our program. I sat down across from her, my heart racing, but my mind clear. Thank you for considering me, I said, trying to sound composed. I'm really excited to be here. I've been working at a nonprofit for a while now, helping youth in the community, but this is definitely a big step for me. Riley nodded thoughtfully. We're looking for people who have that kind of hands-on experience. You've already shown that you can impact people's lives, and now we want to give you the tools to take that impact even further. This isn't just about launching a business, it's about scaling a vision that can change the world. As she spoke, I could feel a fire ignite within me. It wasn't just a job offer, it was an invitation to build something from the ground up, something that could change lives in the way I had always hoped to do. I could see myself leading a project, taking everything I had learned at the nonprofit, and using it to create something even more expansive. That sounds incredible, I said, my voice gaining strength. But I have to admit, I'm a little nervous. I don't feel like I've figured everything out yet. There's still so much I don't know. Riley smiled knowingly. Lena, no one ever has it all figured out. The key is being willing to learn and grow, and it's clear to us that you're someone who does that. That's why we think you're the right fit for this program. We spent the next hour talking about the program in more detail, about the resources and mentorship they would provide, and the goals they hoped to help participants achieve. By the time the meeting was over, I was both exhilarated and terrified. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let fear hold me back anymore. As I walked out of the building and onto the bustling city street, I took a deep breath. I was standing at the edge of something new, something big, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I was ready. The week after my meeting with Riley felt like a whirlwind. Every day, I weighed the pros and cons of the offer. I thought about the nonprofit I was working with, the young people I had grown close to, and the work that I had come to love. They needed me. There was no doubt about that. But I couldn't ignore the pull of the accelerator program, the potential to make an even bigger impact, to reach even more lives. It was a huge leap, and I had no idea what the future would hold. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to make a decision out of fear. I felt like I was on the verge of something bigger. I spent hours walking through the city, alone with my thoughts. The familiar sounds of traffic, people chatting, and the occasional sirens echoed in my mind, but it was the quiet moments between the noise that I found the most telling. I kept coming back to one question: what did I really want? For years, I had been drifting from one job to the next, trying to figure out my place. I had been stuck in this cycle of uncertainty, thinking I wasn't good enough or that I was destined to fail before I even started. But the nonprofit had changed that. It had given me a purpose, a reason to wake up every day and keep pushing forward, even when things were hard. It had allowed me to grow, to discover strengths I hadn't known existed, and to build relationships with people who believed in me. Yet, here was an opportunity to take everything I had learned and transform it into something bigger. It was an opportunity to create something of my own. The accelerator program was a chance to dream, to lead, and to push boundaries. It was a challenge, a risk, but was I brave enough to take it? That night, I sat in my apartment, the city lights flickering outside my window. The decision weighed heavily on me. I reached for my phone and sent a text to Sarah. Hey, can we talk? I need your advice. Within minutes, she responded, of course. What's on your mind? We agreed to meet the next day. Sarah had always been my sounding board, the person I could turn to when I needed clarity. She never judged me, always listened, and helped me see things from a new perspective. She was the kind of friend who made me believe in myself, even when I wasn't sure I could. The next day, we met at the same coffee shop where we had reconnected months ago. Sarah greeted me with her usual warm smile, and we sat down to catch up. I could tell by the way she looked at me that she knew something was weighing on my mind. So, what's going on? She asked, her voice light but knowing. I took a deep breath, then told her everything about the accelerator program, about the chance to launch my own project, and about how much it scared me. I told her about my love for the nonprofit and how torn I felt between the two paths. I don't know if I'm ready for something like this. What if I fail? What if I leave all the people I've come to care about behind? Sarah nodded thoughtfully, taking a moment to let my words sink in. Lena, she began, her tone gentle but firm, you've already proven you can do hard things. Look at everything you've accomplished so far. You went from feeling lost at your graduation to finding a job that you love. You've made an impact in people's lives, and now you're being offered the chance to make an even bigger one. But none of that means you have to leave your past behind. I was silent for a moment, absorbing what she had said. She was right in a way. I didn't have to leave everything behind. I could still stay connected to the nonprofit, still support the community I had grown so close to, but I could also take this opportunity and see where it led me. Yeah, I said slowly, but what if I fail? What if I'm not cut out for something bigger than what I'm doing now? Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. What if you succeed, Lena? What if you're stronger than you think? You won't know unless you take the risk. And failure? That's just part of the process. You're not going to fall flat on your face. You've learned how to get back up over and over again. That's what makes you different from everyone else. You don't give up. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. They were exactly what I needed to hear. For so long, I had been afraid of failing. Afraid that the moment I stepped outside my comfort zone, I would crash and burn. But the truth was, I had already failed in ways that had shaped me into who I was today. And I had gotten back up every single time. I guess I've been scared of what could go wrong, I admitted, my voice quieter now. I get that, Sarah said with a smile. But think about all the things that could go right. You've got this, Lena. You just have to trust yourself. I looked at her, feeling the weight of her words sink into me. This was it, the moment when I had to make a choice. The moment when I had to decide if I was going to stay where it was safe or step into the unknown, armed with everything I had learned so far. That night, as I sat in my apartment reflecting on our conversation, I knew the decision was mine to make. There would never be a perfect moment, no guarantee that everything would work out. But I had learned that life wasn't about waiting for the perfect opportunity, it was about creating one. And if I wanted to truly make a difference, if I wanted to challenge myself and grow even further, I had to take the leap. The next morning, I called Mr. Thompson. I'm in, I said, my voice steady but filled with excitement. I'm ready to take the next step. He was quiet for a moment, and then I heard his voice crack with emotion. Lena, I knew you had it in you. I'm so proud of you. This is just the beginning. And as I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was stepping into the unknown, yes, but I wasn't doing it alone. I had the support of people who believed in me, and more importantly, I believed in myself. This was my moment to shine. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late nights spent revising proposals and business plans. I was officially part of the Nonprofit Accelerator program, and the first step was to build the foundation of my project. There was so much to do, everything from designing the program to securing funding, to learning how to manage a team. But it didn't feel like work, it felt like something I had been preparing for my entire life. The concept of the project was simple yet powerful. I wanted to create a community center dedicated to providing resources and support for young people from marginalized backgrounds, much like the kids I had worked with at the nonprofit. But this was going to be bigger. I envisioned it not just as a space where they could find educational support or a safe place to gather, but a place where they could explore their passions, gain new skills, and ultimately be empowered to create the future they wanted. A place that felt like home, where they could find not only mentorship, but a real sense of belonging. Despite the excitement and optimism surrounding the project, there were moments when I questioned myself. My mind would spin with doubts. Was I really the person to lead this kind of initiative? Could I actually bring this vision to life? The pressure was immense. I was no longer just part of a nonprofit. I was building something from the ground up. I had no blueprint for this. No guide to tell me I was on the right path. And yet, every time I felt like I might falter, I thought about the people who had supported me, Mr. Thompson, Sarah, the kids at the nonprofit, and I reminded myself of the passion that had driven me to this point. I wasn't going to quit now. I had come too far. One chilly morning, Riley, one of the program directors, invited me to a special workshop for accelerator participants. We were meeting at a co-working space that had become our hub, a place where entrepreneurs and social innovators gathered to exchange ideas and advice. As I arrived, I was immediately greeted by other participants, young people with big dreams and fierce ambition, much like myself. Some were already deep into their projects, while others were still trying to figure out what their vision would look like. I couldn't help but feel a surge of energy as I mingled with them. I had always known that I was meant to make a difference, but now I was surrounded by people who shared that same drive. It was contagious. Riley, who had been the one to recruit me, gave a short speech to kick off the workshop. She talked about the challenges we would face, how tough the journey was going to be, but also about the incredible rewards that awaited us if we stayed the course. Most of you are building something from scratch, Riley said, her eyes scanning the room. You're not just creating a business or a service. You're creating a legacy. And that legacy doesn't come without sacrifice. But that's what makes it worth it. You're changing the world. And it starts right here. As Riley spoke, something clicked inside me. I wasn't just starting a community center. I was building something that could change the trajectory of so many lives, just like mine had been changed. That realization gave me a sense of purpose I had never felt before. This was it. The reason I had come this far wasn't just about helping others, it was about the ripple effect of empowering one person and, in turn, changing a whole community. The days leading up to the official launch of my project were intense. There were endless check-ins, meetings with potential partners, and a mountain of paperwork to navigate. But I didn't mind. I was on a mission, and each task, no matter how small, felt like a step towards something greater. The morning of the launch arrived, and I found myself standing in front of the center, a building I had only dreamed about months before. It was a modest space, but it felt like everything I had worked for had led me here. The grand opening was set to begin in just a few hours, and the excitement in the air was palpable. I looked around at the team I had assembled, a group of passionate, driven individuals who were just as committed to this cause as I was. We were all running on adrenaline, a little nervous, but eager to open the doors to the young people who would soon walk through them. As I stood there, surveying the space, I was overcome with emotion. I thought back to my days of uncertainty, to the moment when I thought no one would show up for my graduation. I thought of the people who had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now here I was, ready to give back, ready to lead, ready to make a difference. The doors opened, and the first wave of people began to trickle in. There were families, local youth, community leaders, and a number of supporters I had met through the accelerator program. As the room began to fill with voices and laughter, I couldn't help but smile. This was real. This was happening. I made my way to the front of the room where a small stage had been set up. Riley was there, along with Mr. Thompson, and they gave me encouraging nods as I took my place behind the podium. My hands were shaking slightly, but I steadied myself. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. This space, this community center, isn't just a building. It's a place where dreams can grow, where young people can find the tools and resources they need to shape their futures. It's a space for all of us, where we come together to support one another, to learn, to build, and to rise. This is just the beginning. The crowd applauded, and I felt a surge of gratitude wash over me. The journey had been long, and there were still so many challenges ahead, but in that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Word spread about the center, and soon we had more visitors and volunteers than we could have ever anticipated. Our programs, mentorship, job training, after-school tutoring were all off to a strong start. We had local businesses offering support, community leaders advocating for us, and the young people we were serving showing up with excitement and determination. But with success came new challenges. Managing the growing number of participants and maintaining the quality of our programs was harder than I had imagined. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, days when I doubted if I could keep up with everything. But each time I wanted to quit, I thought back to the very first day, the moment I made the decision to take the leap, and I reminded myself that this was exactly where I was meant to be. The true test of my leadership was just beginning, and I wasn't going to back down now. The early days of the community center were a whirlwind. The programs were gaining momentum, the staff was growing, and the support from the community was more than I could have ever hoped for. But as with any venture, the higher you climb, the steeper the fall. I soon discovered that building something from the ground up wasn't just about passion and vision. It was about managing the unexpected, staying adaptable, and facing challenges head-on. One particular day, about a month after our grand opening, I received a call from one of our primary funders. My heart sank as I picked up the phone. "Lena, I'm afraid we need to pull back some of the funding we pledged. Our budget is tighter than we anticipated, and we've had to make cuts," said the voice on the other end, a woman I had grown to trust during our early negotiations. I could feel the pit forming in my stomach. We relied heavily on that funding to run our key programs, from after-school tutoring to mentorship and job training. Without it, we would struggle to meet the needs of the young people who depended on us. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though the panic was starting to creep in. "About 30%. We'll continue to support you, but you'll need to find alternative sources for the remaining funds." I hung up the phone, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. 30% was a huge blow. We were still in our infancy, and cutting that much funding would put us in a precarious position. I knew I needed to act quickly, but where would I find the money? And how would I keep the programs running without sacrificing quality? The next few days were filled with frantic meetings, late-night brainstorming sessions with my team, and countless phone calls to potential donors, partners, and anyone who might be able to help. The pressure felt unbearable. I had gone from feeling like we were on top of the world to struggling just to keep our heads above water. On top of the financial strain, we were also facing growing pains. The center was gaining popularity faster than I had expected, and while that was a good problem to have, it also came with its own set of challenges. We had too many people, not enough resources, and not enough staff to keep things running smoothly. Programs that had been intended for smaller groups were becoming overcrowded, and I could sense the frustration mounting among both our youth participants and our team. It was during one of these stressful days that I received another blow. One of our lead mentors, Maria, came to me with her resignation. She was overwhelmed, burned out, and unable to juggle the demands of the center with her personal life. I had always known Maria was one of our most passionate and dedicated team members, so hearing this was a gut punch. We couldn't afford to lose someone like her, not at a time like this. But as we talked, I realized that she was at her limit. I couldn't blame her. I was right there with her, constantly running on empty, trying to keep the ship afloat. "Take the time you need," I told her, swallowing the disappointment that threatened to choke me. "We'll figure it out." As Maria walked out the door, I found myself standing in the middle of the center, unsure of what to do next. I was tired, exhausted even. But I couldn't afford to show it, not to my team, not to the young people who depended on us, and especially not to myself. I had come too far to give up now. But where could I turn for support when everything felt like it was falling apart? That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying everything in my mind. The funding cuts, the lack of resources, the growing frustration of the staff. I was responsible for all of it. But then, as I lay there in the dark, something inside me clicked. I couldn't solve everything on my own. I had spent so much time trying to be the perfect leader, the one who had all the answers, but the truth was, I couldn't do this alone. If the community center was going to survive, I needed to lean on the very people who had supported me from the beginning: my team, my mentors, and the community. The next morning, I called a meeting with my staff. I laid out the challenges we were facing: the funding cuts, the staffing shortages, the growing demand for our programs, and asked them for help. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that together, we could figure it out. What happened next was nothing short of remarkable. The team rallied behind the cause, each person stepping up in ways I hadn't expected. We brainstormed ways to fundraise. Everything from community events to online campaigns. Some of the team members volunteered to take on additional responsibilities to cover Maria's departure, while others worked tirelessly to make sure our programs were still running smoothly despite the challenges. The energy in the room was palpable. It was clear that the team wasn't giving up, not without a fight. But even with all the support and determination from my team, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that perhaps we were in over our heads. The burden of leadership, of making sure everything worked, was weighing on me more than I had anticipated. I was stretched thin, emotionally and physically, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it up. Then came the turning point: an unexpected meeting with Mr. Thompson. He had been keeping a close eye on the center's progress, and he could see how hard things had become for me. "Lena," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "you've built something incredible here. But you have to remember that you're not just a one-person show. You need to lean on others and let them help you. You don't have to carry all the weight by yourself. And remember, it's okay to ask for help when you need it." His words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had carried the weight of this project on my shoulders, trying to do everything myself, thinking that if I didn't, I'd fail. But Mr. Thompson was right. I needed to trust others, delegate, and stop pretending that I could do it all. If I wanted the community center to thrive, I had to lead not just with vision, but with vulnerability. I had to allow myself to be supported, to admit when things were tough. In the coming weeks, I began to make changes. I started leaning more on my team, delegating tasks that I had once tried to handle alone. We launched a series of fundraising initiatives and reached out to local businesses for support. Slowly but surely, we began to regain our footing. Though the road was still rocky, I began to feel a renewed sense of hope. This wasn't just my project anymore, it was ours. And together, we would make sure it succeeded. The weeks following our scramble to secure funding and stabilize the programs at the center were a testament to our resilience. We had made it through the storm, and though the journey was far from over, it felt like we were finally on solid ground again. The community had rallied behind us, and we were seeing more young people walk through our doors every day. But despite the success, something inside me had changed. I was exhausted, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. The constant pressure of keeping everything running smoothly, of making sure every need was met, of maintaining the momentum while holding onto the vision, it was all starting to take its toll. One afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing a stack of reports, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, my old friend and mentor. "Hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing? We need to catch up." I stared at the message for a long moment. How was I doing? The truth was, I wasn't sure anymore. I had poured everything I had into the center, but in doing so, I had neglected the one thing that should have been my priority: myself. I typed a quick reply. "I'm okay. Just busy. Let's talk soon." But I knew I was lying. I wasn't okay, not really. I put the phone down, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. I had been so focused on the center, on the young people who depended on me, on my team, that I had lost sight of the importance of self-care. It wasn't just about the center, it was about me too. And if I didn't take care of myself, how could I expect to take care of the people who relied on me? The next morning, I woke up with a resolve I hadn't felt in weeks. It was time to take a step back and reassess, not just the center, but my own life. I needed balance. I spent the day reflecting, something I hadn't done in a long time. I thought about the reasons I started this journey in the first place, the passion to make a difference, to empower others. But somewhere along the way, I had become consumed by the idea of success. I had focused so much on the end goal that I had lost sight of the present moment, of the relationships that had sustained me, of my own well-being. The next few weeks were about reclaiming that balance. I started by setting boundaries. No more working late into the night every single day. I carved out time to spend with the people who mattered most, my friends, my family, and the team that had supported me from day one. I made time for myself. I took walks, read books that had nothing to do with the center, and reconnected with the things that had once brought me joy. It wasn't easy. The temptation to work, to solve every problem that came up, was always there. But each time I felt that pull, I reminded myself of the bigger picture. If I was going to lead this center effectively, I had to be healthy, both in body and mind. I couldn't pour from an empty cup. As I began to regain my energy and sense of self, I noticed a shift in the center as well. With my renewed focus on leadership, I found that I was able to empower my team in ways I hadn't before. I wasn't micromanaging anymore. Instead, I trusted my team to take ownership of their roles, to make decisions, and to lead alongside me. The center was no longer just my vision. It was a collective effort, with each person contributing their unique strengths. In one of our weekly meetings, I looked around at the people I had grown to rely on, and I realized just how much we had accomplished together. From the volunteers who gave their time freely to the young people who walked through our doors every day with hope in their eyes, I saw a community that had been transformed not just by the work we were doing, but by the relationships we were building. And then there was Mr. Thompson. He had been a steady presence throughout all of this. His wisdom and guidance had helped me navigate some of the most challenging moments. One evening, as I sat down with him over coffee, he looked at me with a knowing smile. "You've done something incredible here, Lena. But remember, a good leader knows when to step back, to rest, and to let others take the lead. You're building a legacy, but you're not doing it alone. And that's the beauty of it." His words stuck with me. I realized that I didn't need to carry the weight of everything on my shoulders. Leadership wasn't about being the hero, it was about fostering a team, building a community, and allowing space for others to grow. As the months passed, the center continued to thrive. We had expanded our programs, added new resources, and built partnerships with local businesses and organizations. More young people were taking part in our mentorship and job training programs, and we had a growing network of volunteers and donors. But more importantly, the community was flourishing. It wasn't just about the services we provided. It was about the relationships we nurtured, the trust we built, and the sense of belonging we created. There were still challenges ahead. Running a nonprofit was never going to be easy, and the road would always be bumpy. But I had learned that true leadership wasn't about doing everything perfectly. It was about being present, being vulnerable, and knowing when to lean on others. One day, as I sat in my office looking out at the bustling center, a wave of gratitude washed over me. I had come so far, from that lonely day when I graduated and no one showed up, to the thriving community center we had built together. The journey had been filled with obstacles, self-doubt, and moments of despair, but it had also been filled with growth, discovery, and connection. I looked down at my phone and saw a message from Sarah. "I'm proud of you, Lena. Look how far you've come. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." I smiled to myself. She was right. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And so, the story continues. The center was just the beginning, a small spark that had the potential to grow into something even greater. But no matter where this journey took me, I knew one thing for certain. I would never forget the lesson that had carried me through it all, that the true power of leadership lies not in doing it all, but in empowering others to do it with you. The future was bright, and together, we would keep building, keep growing, and keep changing the world, one life at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough.